Hello, and a huge warm welcome to my guest today, Samantha Bowen, who I am very excited to chat to about all the wonderful things that she does within the SEND and heritage sector. But before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little more about our guest. Samantha delivers training globally to the museum and cultural sector on all aspects of welcoming children with special educational needs and disabilities. She also speaks at conferences, writes articles, and mentors museums on organisational change in equity, diversity, and inclusion. Samantha has worked in the museum sector for over 25 years, during which time she has been a curator, education manager, and museum developmental officer. She brings this knowledge combined with her lived experience as a SEND parent to her disabled daughter Lucy to support museums as a freelance consultant. But that is not all. Samantha is also the founder of Send in Museums campaign, author of the Special Schools and Museums Toolkit, and creator of www.sendinmuseums.org, a sector advocacy and guidance resource. In 2021, she was named the Radical Changemaker in the Museum Association's Museums Change Lives Awards. And in 2024, she won the Sector Impact Award from the Museums and Heritage Show. Wow, what an amazing list of achievements and goals. So, enough of me talking. Let's welcome Samantha to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. And please call me Sam as well. It's very formal. Let's be friends.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, give myself imposter syndrome with you already now.
When someone asks you to
Yeah,
like give a little bio and then you write it all down, you think actually pretty
yeah,
awesome.
go me.
Did a
Yeah,
few things. It's
yeah,
nice though, isn't it? Because we forget to reflect
yeah,
on what we've done and how far we've come. And I always say this to people that I'm renowned for this as well, is just kind of going, right, what next? What next? What am I doing now? And just like powering through, isn't it? And then
yeah,
actually when you take the minute to go, I've achieved
yeah,
quite a lot. I think that's really important to do. So if anything, when I
yeah.
ask people to do bios, it's nice for people to just reflect and go, oh,
Oh yeah,
actually,
look where I've come, and in quite
yeah,
a short space of time as well.
yeah,
But obviously, as I always say, I've just spoke at a conference a couple of weeks ago, actually, an Accessing Museums conference. There was a keynote. It's like, oh, get me a keynote kind of thing. But I did it on advocacy. And my central note to the advocacy thing is that no one does it on their own. Well, they shouldn't be actually. I'd say that for the get-go. I think successful, proper, embedded advocacy, wherever it is, work is a teamwork, is in working with finding like-minded people like yourself and finding different opportunities to share your knowledge and experience, but also to ask questions and to nobody knows it all, and so all of that wonderful stuff has definitely been evolved because of the people that I've worked with and I've learned from, including when I run training. I still write like copious amounts of notes. And when we have like breakout sessions and the people are coming back with their lovely ideas, it's phenomenal. I run training at least once a week, not twice a week. Every time people come up with new things, just thinking to the same, mostly the same
yeah.
scenarios I'm setting. So yeah, it's really, really lovely. And also, I will talk about her in a minute, but all of this has been inspired, the work I'm doing now, by my daughter Lucy. So without her, I mean, she should probably get some of the profits. She gets nice clothes. It's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah, she doesn't go without.
So yeah, let's talk about Lucy because first and
Yeah,
foremost, you are a mum. So tell us a
yeah.
little bit about your journey to becoming a parent. How was that for you?
Oh, I don't want to. Yeah, I always say, do I have to do a trigger warning? It was a long journey. I haven't had a traditional route into museums or into parenthood really. So I hit all of life kind of late, and some of that I know we're going to talk potentially about neurodivergence, but I had a late diagnosis of dyslexia at like 18, after I'd completely flunked my levels, and then I
Oh,
went back, did another A level, and did really well once I'd known, and went to uni. So I went to uni quite late, 25-ish. And with the diagnosis of dyslexia was really really supported and through. That was all great. I met my I started doing museums as volunteering and just really liked that, and that sort of like steered me into the direction of doing an MA museum course, and that's where I met Craig, who's also on the course. I say I've stood up in conferences with like museum people, like 100 people in the room, and oh well, there were only two men on the course and you should have seen the other one, which is an awful thing to say. because actually he's lovely, but it's just like, break the ice thing. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's how we met. And so we've been together a long time. In fact, we're celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary next month. So that's
Oh,
amazing. Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. However, meeting the right person is one thing, isn't it? And we both wanted a family once we got our jobs sorted. And unfortunately, that didn't really seem to come out well. So my journey to becoming a mum was quite tumultuous, and ended up with two IVF rounds of IVF, and all sorts of different things as well that I won't bore you with. But and then Lucy, when she was born, oh, in a difficult pregnancy, in that, but nobody really knew why. So I laugh now; it's not funny at all. And if it was to happen now, we're talking what, 16 years ago. If it was to happen, I don't think. I hope it wouldn't happen now. Maybe it would, but a very vagueness around obstetrics about why your baby's not growing very along the same parameters that it should be, and all the terminology for it and everything, but nobody actually really pointing a finger at any particular cause. And so when she was born by C-section, which she had to be because she had extended breech, so I say she does like a yogic pose with her legs above her ears, um, but she had a pretty much at birth diagnosis of some, and this is, I probably should say trigger warning actually for if anyone listening. I think
Okay.
it's mostly parents, isn't it? It's mostly people who are going to be listening to this. But these are the actual words, and I think it's important because it led on to my work. So I don't just throw out something that could be contentious for just to make people feel horrible. But within half an hour of her going off to special care baby unit and me being wheeled back to the maternity bay, with other people, their babies, me without mine. A paediatrician said she thought very loudly, said, "I think there's something genetically wrong with your baby," and that was, it's actually, that was the line. And you remember words like that, don't you?
Yeah, it's
So,
deep.
so in that moment, she was othered, my daughter was othered. My brand new baby was othered, and so was I, because I felt very different to the other women in that ward with their babies back, having just also had C-sections, but they brought their babies back with them. So I wasn't aware. I knew that felt wrong, and I knew it stung. And then you're launched into a very dramatic, very different world that no one talks about in the NCT antenatal classes or anything. The baby magazines, all those magazines you buy when you're pregnant, or think, oh,
Yeah.
all the things you think you need to learn. Q, do you? It's a question, because my stuff wasn't in there. My story wasn't in there. So one thing I have actually just done, and it had been welling up in me for a few years, but it was going through a counselling that I went through last year. It suddenly brought up this book's kind of written itself, but I've just written my memoir, and I'm going to be hopefully publishing it, self-publishing this year. It's going to be
Oh,
called
brilliant.
the Phoenix and the Unicorn. So have a watch out, and I'll let you know when it is.
Yeah, keep us updated. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think there aren't enough stories out there for well, I said mums, but also dads, I guess, as well. But some parents to sort of show the reality, actually. And I wish I'd had a book like that where I could have read it going, and there are a few
Yeah.
more now. Rachel Bright's amazing book, The Skies Were Under, is incredible. But just realities, and seeing at the start, it was all very bleak conversations. No, my daughter's got a unique genetic rearrangement, so fair
Okay.
enough. There isn't anything that you could signpost to. You can't be any kind of club. There's no sort of Down syndrome association for us. Although ironically, she's been misdiagnosed on visual appearance alone 15 times, and she's not even 16 yet, by medical staff. I mean,
Wow.
everybody from the paediatrician at the beginning who said she thought that was the condition, right through to eye people, you know, when she's going to have an eye test,
Chemistry.
ophthalmologist, yeah, when she had all sorts of people have sidled up to me, complete strangers in the street when we're having lunch, like in a cafe, or run. I've got joyfully sharing
Oh,
that they have one of theirs in their family, and again, I'm using quotes because I think. And you think, oh, I almost wish, because that was that's a club. There's a club that we could have joined. There's a group of
yeah.
people that would have gone, yeah, I get it, and come, and it's a very lonely experience, isn't it? So, gosh, well, I don't even started where we come from this, but anyway, I've been working quite happily, as you said, in my museum career, being a curator, and I set up a learning department at Leeds Castle, which is a massive heritage site. So curatorial and learning has always been really where I'm interested at. So not
Mhm.
necessarily looking after the objects, that's massively important, but actually the stories that are unlocked in, and unlocking those stories from objects is, and particularly the people that are involved in those stories, has always been the thing that I've been massively interested in. And even long before Lucy was even thought of, let alone born, I was working with what we used to call hard to reach groups. They're not kind of called that anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, hard to reach groups, particularly with adults who had low literacy levels in their families. And again, this kind of harks back to even earlier than that. From like 19 to 25, I had a lot of different jobs, and they were all before uni, and they were all kind of in the sphere of support or that kind of thing. And I got a very strong sense of justice. So I worked in the police, I worked in the probation service, I housed ex-offenders, I worked in an amazing young people's housing complex foyer, and that's always been my drive, is to sort of not find the underdogs, not the right way, but supporting people who are really
Yeah.
struggling in some ways, and go, come on, there's a way out of this.
For it.
So yeah, that's kind of been my thread, and now it's kind of to taking it through into museums, and now there are more sort of groups that museums do work with, that, you know, still those groups that I'm talking about. But what I discovered after having Lucy, and of course Craig and I, as my husband, still going out to museums and galleries and for our days out and stuff, was how exclusionary they were, and how we were just sort of screened out of being able to access stuff. So sometimes physically, as she got bigger, then obviously, you know, the disability buggies that still look like wheelchairs,
Right.
still look like push chairs, and people are saying, oh, you've got to take your chair, we don't allow push chairs in the wherever it is house, and you're trying to explain actually it's a disability push chair,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, to just like craft activities and things where you go along, and they've given you materials and instructions that are not necessarily accessible and inclusive if you've not got great fine motor skills, or if you haven't got
Right.
great vision and you can't see the thing, you know, the describing of the stuff. um, and it was at those points, a couple of bad experiences we had, really bad experiences, and at an age, Lucy was at an age, she was about 5, which I started to realise that she was realising that she was being treated differently. And that was it. That for me was like, no, something like clang came down, and I thought, I'm not having
Mama Bear
this.
came out.
Mama bear, yeah. So, whereas I'd had to give up my career pretty much overnight when she was born, because it just wasn't, she's got complex health needs, and in and out of hospital. If it
Yeah.
wasn't for an operation, and serious things like hip surgery and heart surgery and eye surgery, and then she, you know, she got E. coli sepsis when she was 5 months old, nearly died from that. I mean, you know, it was just,
Yeah.
it was a roller coaster slash train crash for 4 years, um, until she went to school, and then I found my people, and it was great, because that was another thing. I found I didn't find any parents groups with kids with babies born different, and unfortunately, I found that going into quote unquote ordinary kind of, you know, mother and baby groups, they didn't want to know. I mean, it was quite, again, it's I've had to put it in the book because it's, you know, years of being scarred, of thinking, oh, well, there
Traumatic,
was
isn't it?
very traumatic, you know, I mean, to think there's something wrong with you and your kid, it's just awful. So yeah, so when I got back into museums, when she was old enough and settled in school, and I thought we'd had some of these bad experiences, and then funnily enough, a great experience at another museum, talk about a lot in my training, called Powell Cotton Museum in Birchington in Kent, really way over in East Kent. And they just have this room where they've got equipment, bits of the collection that you can play with, like African drums, and
Oh, brilliant.
it's not everybody's kind of cup of tea, because a lot of stuffed animals in there. I will say the collection is mostly stuff. So if you're vegetarian or vegan, you probably wouldn't want to go there. But there's things to touch, ethnographic objects, all sorts of things. And but the point is, you can just play with them in your own way, Lucy. There's no labels, there's no instructions, there's no this is what good looks like. Which a lot of the craft activities before we'd done, or you know, oh, we're going to make this, we're going to make X, we're going to do this, and therefore, and this is one I've made earlier. And
Yeah, it's
every
that
time you do,
prescriptive
yeah,
element, isn't it,
yeah,
of it? Yeah.
totally, totally valuing product over process,
Hmm.
and very narrowing down. And you know, I could see that I'd done that myself in the past as a curator and a learning person. I thought, oh God, I now know absolutely we can do this differently. So that's kind of, I got my old job back as a museum development officer back in 2017, and I was very lucky to get funding. Well, I guess, you know, my manager was just like, yeah, come on, we can do this. She had a lot of faith in me, actually, and I'm really grateful to her. She was amazing.
That's good. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we did a small pilot project to start with 3 special needs schools and 3 museums. learnt so much. I mean, I'm talking small budget, small time frame, intense, massive conversations and practicing and testing with classes. And they thought, yeah, absolutely, they're relevant. Museums are relevant for, and we're talking
Yeah,
a huge range of needs as well, up to PMLD. Students with profound multiple learning disabilities as well. So then the next year, with those findings, I wrote the Special Schools and Museums Toolkit, which was the only sector guidance. There wasn't any before that, and
really.
there was a massive appetite for it. So as soon as we shared it, it was like woof, it was like a sponge. Then in 2019, we got a bigger funding to roll out that project across the whole of the southeast, and it was a bit nuts. 26 partners across. Well,
Wow.
I don't know how many. I can't remember how many counties. It was all of the southeast apart from London. Yeah, that
People
was
just bought into it straight away and were really happy to get
yeah,
involved.
yeah. Well, they really wanted to. I mean, as I bought into it, it was easier to find the groups than it was the museums for some reasons. Because sometimes some museums, they're kind of a bit like, well, no, we've got this program for X number of years, and I'm coming in a bit. I'm a bit of wrecking ball approach. I was. I'm not so much anymore. Coming and going, come on, we've got to do this now. We've got this much funding. It's got to be spent by then. But no, we had everybody from. Well, we had Windsor Castle was probably the glitziest.
Ah,
Portsmouth Dockyard, huge site, down to teeny weeny little museums as well in towns that had like 3 rooms, and actually some great work we did with them. And then send groups were from huge range from preschool, literally, toddlers, babies and toddlers, up to post 16. And we also had a home educator group because, as you know, the home educator community has a high percentage of send
yeah.
children and young people within it. So, and then the case studies that we came out of there, we then had 13 case studies because it was 13 partnerships. And at that point, it was coming towards. I read this brilliant end of project conference in summer of 2019. So like dot dot dot, and everybody was sat there going, "Oh, this is brilliant! This is the new wave," And I got the funders to turn up, and yes, we're going to fund this. And it was like, okay, and I applied for funding. Luckily, I applied for funding there and then, for Arts Council funding, because I knew what I needed then was a website, which is sendingmuseums.org, so that instead of me having to keep answering emails, there could be this one-stop shop that people could go and go, okay, I want to know a bit more. And so it's built on 3 pillars of learning. So one is one is why. It's an advocacy kind of a whole section on why do it. And I would suggest that if anybody who's interested is listening to this today, particularly who's working in the heritage and museum sector, go and have a look at the 10-minute video that we also had made as part of the project. It's on the why section on YouTube, because it would melt any heart. I think anyone that's thinking of why put time and money and investment into working with this hugely valuable group of visitors, watch that and it'll explain why. Then the second pillar is how. So there's how for people literally starting from nothing to people who've perhaps developed some stuff but then really want to get a bit, working with different kind of community groups or schools perhaps. And then there's a who, which is a section more obviously, as it suggests, really putting you in contact with people. And it's a very this blog there's blog posts on there as well, so it's a very organic thing that I still, even though
Brilliant.
the project's long finished. And then obviously we hit lockdown.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, of course.
So for Craig and I, and Lucy is clinically vulnerable, or was clinically vulnerable,
Yeah.
so we were shielding for 5 months. I yeah, I won't talk too much about it because it's triggering for everyone to remember it, isn't it? But it was hard, and we both had to work because we couldn't be furloughed for some reason. I still don't know why. So we were juggling all of that. And at that point, I'd also just got the funding in the December 2020 for
Oh,
this
no.
2 year thing. But what had happened through 2020 was everybody pivoted to online as we are now.
Yep.
So training became, so there was an appetite for this. It was a perfect storm to think,
Yeah.
okay, now I can actually see this and make something good from this. It's not capitalizing on it. It was literally seeing an opportunity that there was an audience of lots of furloughed members of the museum staff who weren't allowed to do their ordinary job, but they could go away and do training on something else, skill up, and work with people like Group for Education in Museums, GEM. And we ran a 4-week program. I'm doing that again the end of this month, and it's been going on every year since. So
Oh, really?
Yeah, we have people from around the world coming on onto some of the trainings. That's a UK wide one, but the conferences I've done for Museum Next, for instance, you've got people coming in from every different country. So the online us learning having to learn quickly how to use technology I'd never used before is a game changer in terms of advocacy, hugely.
Yeah,
So yeah, so that's kind of where it came about, and then Lucy is features a lot in my slides, my training slides. We go out and test things, and it's really sort of snowballed really. So I guess the Sector Impact Award was hopefully reflects that send is now a word that most people know, even though I know they use different terminology in different parts of the UK. Um, but for that intents and purposes, it works, and actually on most museums now, they are thinking, even if they've only got a small budget, well, there's things I can do, and the website helps. They
yeah,
never have to go to a professional like me. They can start and do stuff on their own, and I think that's really important that people have something
yeah.
that they can actually, you know,
Yeah, I agree. I think it's being able to give somebody the reins, isn't it, of
mm,
taking control while they get to the point where they can reach out to other people if
yeah,
they need further support, but giving people that confidence to be able to do little bits, because sometimes it is just little bits, isn't it? It
oh
is
yeah, yeah,
tweaks that you can do, little things that don't cost money, don't take too much time. I've recently really got involved with the heritage sector, actually.
great,
This was something that I didn't have a lot of experience in, and over the last year or so I've really started getting involved in the heritage and culture sector. I'm looking to do more research in supporting home educating families in
yeah,
terms of the provision that's being
yeah,
provided. And you know what, it's really opened my eyes, because I have unlocked a whole world that I didn't know was there. And the people that I've been speaking to, hearing the amazing work that some museums and heritage sites are doing, and the challenges, because we think about challenges in lots of different ways. And some people are saying, I tried just using my provision that I provide for schools and just putting it on for home ed families. And obviously, they're a different type of
yeah,
group,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
doesn't translate across. And like you quite rightly said, a high percentage of these families have children with additional needs
mm,
or disabilities that need to be catered for in a
yeah,
different way than a
yeah,
mainstream, school group coming in. So it's about kind of creating that element of sharing good practice, sharing what works, sharing our challenges. And I've got like a working group of museums at the
it's
moment, where
brilliant.
we're kind of sharing this information, and looking at ways that we can build on the research to really kind of, because do you know what I've found? Because I'm kind of in the middle of speaking to the museums, and then also speaking to the home ed families.
Yeah,
And the home ed families want to access the
yeah,
provision. They
yeah,
want
yeah,
to come and see this amazing work that everyone's putting on. And the museums want to put it on. But there's a disparity between the two, because then when they put it on, the people aren't coming. And
yeah,
it's very much around that communication, isn't it? And
yeah,
actually the knowledge of knowing what's out there. And like you were saying, building those connections with people and getting everyone talking.
yeah,
That's kind of, I think, one of the hardest things to do, isn't it? Is actually making it visible to the right
yeah.
people.
And I think I must put you in contact with somebody, Nikki McIntosh. I don't know if you know her, but
Oh yeah, we're
yeah,
already in contact. Yeah,
I
she's fab.
mentored her last year, and she's great. So she's doing the same similar thing as you're saying,
Yes.
without the research side of things, and putting a toolkit together and a framework for doing that, because it is the next group. I think when I started out, I'll just quickly reflect back, because in terms of getting people talking together, there was also a mindset where the advocacy was massively important. I came up against, all successful and it's all fine and done this project, and then I would go to conferences and sort of, and I'd be standing there with my cup of coffee in the break and say, well, I just don't understand why isn't, where's the buy-in? Surely this should be like, that phrase, shooting fish in a barrel. This should be dead easy. There's a need, there's a group, I've identified the group, identified the ways of doing it, let's get going, kind of thing. And I got told two things, and they were from older middle-aged white men. And I think there is a narrative there in that traditional views of they high up in education services. One of them said it's just not sexy enough. Actually, yeah. And I thought, ooh, I feel really uncomfortable talking about
Yeah.
kids and that word together, personally. And the other one said it's just not the right time. We've got bigger things we're grappling with. Now, at the time, this was prior to lockdown. And again, there's another reason why lockdown and COVID was a really apposite moment to point out that for those people who access freedom into access into, even if it's just physical accessibility, freedom into
Yeah.
every day being able to leave the house and just go, things you take for granted. As soon as everybody was locked down in their homes, there was suddenly this sort of, oh, that doesn't feel very nice. Oh, I think I've perhaps got a bit more of an understanding now. Didn't last very long, unfortunately, but there was a moment, and that was the shift. That was definitely the shift. But for those two people, the things that were sexy and timely were decolonisation, climate change, and the LGBTQ plus stuff, all of which I am not saying are not important. What I am saying is we've been talking as a sector about them for a long time, and disability we've been talking about for a lot longer. So University of Leicester, I work with them a lot in terms of the research centre. 30 years plus they've been trying to crack this nut. So in a way, the SEND stuff, although I can't claim credit for all of the, because once it's gone, once it's out there, it's out there, isn't it? And it becomes its own thing. You can't really claim credit then for the bigger thing that it creates. You've just sort of sown a seed and hoped that it would blow across many fields and get to be a bigger thing, a
Yeah.
bigger meadow of stuff. But starting with children, starting with and children particularly, and the families and the schools did obviously, when people were making that, their museums accessible to them, were obviously going to be making it more accessible to adults with disabilities, regardless of
Yeah.
whether or not they had learning disabilities. So disability has become back more, I think, on the platform of like, oh yeah, now we need to do this. And okay, so some things do take capital investment, like a changing place loo, potentially ramps, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
actually, there are ways of working in partnership now that the more established stuff, again, that changing place lose really sped up through the whole lockdown thing of people understanding, how wrong it is that, 1 in 260 people in the population in the UK can't go out for a whole day out because they can't go to the loo somewhere. That's ludicrous. It's like, so once people start thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, I'll make a difference. So there's been a campaign that I've helped support as well, work with others on as well, and getting museums to have changing places losing them. Because I think the other thing is that museums and heritage sites, their funding is it's pretty tough times for museums. We've had the culture wars, dare I say, politics, Brexit didn't help. There's lots of things that have, and this decolonisation stuff with the culture wars. But if museums can, particularly ones that are centred in towns, like in or cities, they can become cornerstones in their communities of shining a light on accessibility and inclusion by the great work that they do in the community, the different community groups they work with. So families like mine can rub shoulders with families that we wouldn't normally, because
Yeah.
Lucy goes to a special needs school, and then you start making like real systemic change, which then is a bit like throwing the seed in the field again. It goes out and goes, okay, now this town is actually really buzzing. There's shops here that are more accessible, and
Yeah.
other community groups are going to other places, and other things are sparking up. So I really think museums are, and I have always said and always felt that museums are really important centres, and I think that people are waking up to that now. It's not just about the objects in the cases anymore.
Uh-huh.
Um, so
Yeah, I agree. I think there has really been a shift in actually identifying them as places where families can go. I think,
absolutely, yeah,
a bit like libraries, isn't it? You have that
yeah,
kind of old assumption that you have to be quiet and you can't touch anything, and it's just not like that anymore. Libraries, museums, heritage sites, they're all really encompassing of that family element,
yeah,
family learning, lifelong
yeah.
learning, and everything. So I think there is a shift happening now that we are realizing this, but it's just making that, like you say, accessible for everyone. And I think
Mm.
it's really hard, isn't it? Because I find a lot of people that I speak to that are doing things like you, that are really kind of pioneering for change and things like that. It's all coming from lived experience
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
we understand the challenges
yeah,
from that real core element, don't we?
yeah.
And I think that's really important to drive something, because actually you're not going to stop that person in their tracks, because
No,
the passion,
yeah,
that
there's no stopping.
determination,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
drive, that mama bear element that
yeah,
comes
yeah,
out,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
no, you're not going to tell me no. And it
yeah,
really pushes forward. So
yeah.
a lot of the big things and a lot of the big like campaigns and that are really driven by people that have that lived experience. And I think that's really important, because for somebody who hasn't maybe experienced it, or like when you were just saying those stats about people not being able to go to the toilet,
Mm, mm,
I don't have that experience, because I can use
yeah,
your
Yeah.
An average toilet.
Yeah.
I don't have to plan my day around things
Yeah.
like that. And even with, my daughter is autistic and has ADHD. I'm autistic. We come under that umbrella of
Mm.
having SEND,
Mm.
but we can access things
Yeah.
really, really easy. Our kind of access things are around kind of those learning elements and, listening and
Mm.
seeing and things like that. But actual basic bodily functions and
Yeah.
things like that, we don't have to think about that. So I think it's really important that we have these conversations and that we share these kind of really scary statistics, and
Mm.
we put it out in front of people, because actually, unless you
Mm.
experience it, it's really easy to just coast along and not think about
Yeah.
it. And we
Definitely.
need people fighting about it. We need people shouting. We need people talking about it. So conversations like this are so, so important to actually get them in front of people as well. I think it's really important.
And I think the you said about the lived experience. I've coined a term called lived loved experience now, because I think I don't know if you feel the same, but as a parent, as Lucy's gotten a bit older, I've sometimes been shouted down, particularly by staff. I think in terms of delivery staff like therapists and stuff. Well, what would Lucy like? Well, Lucy's non-verbal, so I have to approximate her and obviously work in her best interest. But actually, it started really annoying me that actually parents and the papa bears that were out there as well, not just the mama bears, but we were being silenced or guilted into going, well, actually, don't speak for your blah 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 child or whatever. And I think, well, I have loved experience. I have lived experience of caring for somebody 24/7, apart from obviously when she's at school, and her needs are 24/7. That is my lived experience, but yes, I am not a wheelchair user, so I don't have that, but I have loved experience, and my loved experience is I know what my wheelchair user needs. And so that comes to the next thing in terms of, I always, right from the start, I said, I did go to a couple of amazing places. There was a lady called Gina Davis who runs Attention Autism, I think, or used to. And she said, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. I thought, yes, and that's exactly the same with all these people kept running up to me and going, what's it like to have a Down syndrome child? I go, oh, she's not. And B, how would I know anyway? Because, one child with one condition is that child with that condition. Because actually, like we're both glasses wearers on this call today, both got long hair. That's not the only thing about us. So I try and sort of like really humanize it and
Yeah.
actually humor it, a little bit of humor in when I start my training. Ask who has lived, loved experience, because it blows people's minds how many people have. I mean, so at the moment, I think we're running about 11-12% of UK child population are disabled, 18.4% of just school-age kids in England. Actually, I think school attenders in England have special educational needs, and in Scotland it's 40.5%. I did the research the other day because I had to. Yeah, exactly. So obviously, when I asked the course and there's like 30, 40 people on the screen and like 10 put their hand up, it's a beautiful moment because the other people go, oh, I didn't know Jeff had a such and such. Oh, I must. And then you start to realize in your organization, you already have the live loved experience. You just
Yes.
never asked.
Don't talk about it.
I
Yeah.
know you don't talk about it, but you should. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's let's share that, because you then have a passion for the needs group. And I always use so to go back, as needs-based language, not diagnostic. Pointless, utterly pointless to have diagnostic language, because that is just a label. And as I reflected back to how I started this, when Lucy was mislabeled 30 minutes after being born, I knew at that moment that labels weren't, well, they're just not useful. I mean, they're
Yeah.
harmful, they're horrible, but they're just not useful. So in terms of a business, for people watching this who may be thinking, well, all right, well, how am I going to make my business a bit more reflective? Just think of needs. And then you might find, okay, well, I've got needs here, visual needs or physical needs or sensory needs. That'll match up with a great big, much bigger group.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
already I have people coming on my training and they go, oh, I think actually that would really work for so-and-so in our museum who runs a group with adults with dementia, or a sight loss group. I spoke to somebody yesterday that run a group with adults with Parkinson's. Oh, yes, that will work for them. So there's this cross-pollination thing. And then what you're trying to do is make the business case going, well, now you put an X amount of money into, and it's not this tiny group that you're talking about, these
Yeah.
resources or this programming, or having a quiet session, for instance, on every last Sunday of the month or whatever. Yes, it takes a bit of planning and it takes a bit of, but once you get going, then it cuts into, but look at the range of people it's going to benefit. And
Uh,
then I also, the other thing is to remind people that it's a whole family experience. So Lucy's an only child for probably obvious reasons after what I said, but she's an only child, but many of our friends have got disabled children and then non-disabled siblings. So, and
Yeah.
when we go out with our extended family, there are non-disabled cousins who are children. So if you are not going to meet the needs of Lucy, you're not going to get all of us. And that's that's 4 adults that would have been buying tickets and lunch and all the rest of it, two other kids that would have been buying tickets, and then and then Lucy as well. So in terms of the purple pound and the economic thing, I don't like going in with that to start with, because I would hope there's this core injustice bit in me would hope that everywhere's, yes, of course we should be doing this. This isn't just a nice thing to do. We should be doing, there's the Equality Act. I could quote a whole load of laws why you should be doing it. But unfortunately, sometimes my experience
Yeah.
is it does come down to that, the bang in the buck. And so, why invest 30k in the changing place loo? Because you're going to get this many more people. And you're also then making your town better because more people can actually come and shop in the town or whatever. So, there is a business sense to this as well, but that's not where I started.
Mm. But I think you're right. I think it's important to highlight that because they are businesses and
Yeah,
they
of
need
course.
to run as a business. So they do need to have that hat on and that element of thinking. But it's nice to not just focus on that
Mm,
element and
mm,
try and match everything up. And you're right, some of these things that people can do, it's going to be beneficial for all of your visitors,
yeah.
not just those who have those additional needs that
Mm,
you need to consider. And that's a great point that you made about making it needs based, because
mm,
you're not just saying, oh, this is a, for argument's sake, an autism friendly session.
mm.
Actually, there are lots of needs within that group
Yeah,
of individuals that would widen it out to lots of other types of
yeah.
needs and conditions and disabilities that would also
And
benefit from
and
it.
there's pan disability as well. I mean, there's lots of conditions that actually, just because I know children who have Down syndrome and are autistic as well. They have a
Yes.
co-condition. So which group do they go to? It's just doesn't. And also, nobody wants to be a label. It's just, you might as well say, well, we'll have Lucy Sundays, and you and my daughter can go. Well, they're different, slightly different spelling. But it is when you bring in the humour and go, yeah, it's ridiculous, really, isn't it? Let's stop doing that.
Yeah.
Move along and just make stuff so that it's. I think there's a lot of fear. Again, why I try and bring in the humour. I mean, I've done some very dark jobs in my past. The police was not pleasant. I've been to some very, very dark places in the back of an ambulance with Lucy. I think when you've had that, I wouldn't say my humour is dark, but I don't worry about bringing in an element of humour and going, come on, the sky is not going to fall in if you use the word normal. You know, Sen parents, on the whole, I've only ever really met Sen parents that are would just be delighted that you're actually trying to start. So, nobody's expecting it to be perfect to start with, but do start, and don't let your fear and I don't even think it's unconscious bias, but I think most prejudice comes from fear. And well, I won't do anything because therefore I won't do the wrong thing if I don't do
Worried
anything.
about, yeah,
But
yeah.
not doing something is the wrong thing. So,
I
that's
think Yeah, I think there's a fine line, isn't there? If you approach something and you use incorrect terminology, I think as long as you're open to having that discussion
yeah.
and learning why that person felt that it was the incorrect
Mm,
terminology to use, I think that's, like you say, that's better than just not saying
yeah.
anything and keeping that barrier between you.
Yeah.
It's all about learning, and we can't, as individuals, we can't know everything. We can't
No, no,
we
I
can't
don't.
understand
No.
everyone's experience, and
Yeah.
it's something like terminology in lots of different
Mm,
areas and fields and what have you. It's hard to sometimes get the right terminology,
yeah.
especially because things change quite frequently as well, don't they?
Yeah.
But while people are trying to work out different things, it can change quite quickly. So
Yeah.
it is really easy to get terminology wrong,
Yeah.
especially in something like sense. But I think as long as you are open to discussion and you're kind about it,
Yeah.
I agree, I think it's much better to have those conversations and be corrected, because
Yeah.
then you learn from it
The
and you're able
kindness
to
is the
then
thing,
meet
isn't it?
those
Yeah.
needs. Yeah,
I
exactly.
gave a talk a couple of years ago at a big show, it's a big like sort of conference show thing. And at the end of it, I obviously asked questions, and I was really thrown by this. There's a lady at the front, and she said, "Am I allowed? Are we allowed to use the word disabled?" And I went, what? Like, what? And she said, well, I didn't know if I was allowed to. I thought, it's not a dirty word. And I've seen that since, actually, like disabled is not dirty. And I think, well, this is, yeah, we have still got a long way to go, haven't we? Where, I mean, I remember race and equality training in like the 90s, when I was in the working probation service, in like early 90s. And, you know, the ridiculousness, that the fear that was driven into people, like not being able to ask for a black coffee, for crikey. You just think, and you'd think now, no, surely not. But so I think we need to get into a space where it's seeing the individual first. And
Mm.
there's a lovely lady called Ali Chappell. She does the flip the narrative. I think she's trademarked it now. But the flipping the narrative, find it, Ali Chappell online. I'll give you a link. But it's just about realizing how much more we have in common with each other as being human. So once you start the conversation from that point, go, how would I feel if I was told I couldn't come in today because there was something we really struggle with. You know, pick your worst fear and say, well, most days of the museum that's in there. You know, that kind of thing, or just, oh, you can't come in because, you know, there's no ramp, for instance, or we can't make any sort of adjustments, or we won't make any adjustments.
Yeah.
So I think that's, yeah, putting it back, which is why when I say start saying who's got lived, loved experience, but even for those people who haven't, doesn't mean they can't be advocates, doesn't mean they can't get on board with this if they just reflect themselves, which is kind of what happened in the lockdown for a very small window, where people reflected on how they felt about being restricted and only allowed out at certain times and not being able
Yeah.
to go to places that they wanted to. There was a slight bit of empathy there at that point,
Mm.
but it didn't last.
No.
No.
Things like that. So I remember saying I thought that education was going to be flipped on its head, and there'd be more. Because
Yeah.
obviously, I'm a huge advocate for alternative
Yeah,
education,
of course.
different
Yeah.
ways for different types of individuals to learn, and being aware of your options and making an informed decision based on the needs of your
Yeah.
family. So I was like, yes, education is going to be flipped
Well,
on
you
its head.
hope, don't you? It's like, I don't think it's naive. It's hope.
Yeah, and it didn't. And then we
Yeah.
started going back to how it was before, and I was like, oh, it's not quite happened
Yeah.
the way I thought it was
Yeah.
going to. But I mean, things have happened. Awareness is definitely more there. We are talking about it more.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just we still have a long way to go in
Yeah.
many different aspects. What are some things then that museums can do to make it more inclusive for visitors? I know there's
Yeah.
probably a range in terms of bigger things that would require time, resources, money.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are some smaller things as well that can be
Yeah.
done.
There are, and quick wins. So I always say, think about the visitor journey. Well, there's two things really. Yeah. Stick a rock. I'm going to just say that actually. And I usually have a sticker rock with me, but I've used it so much, it's bending now. I don't really know what a sticker seaside rock, but you know you have the word that runs all the way through.
Right.
So
Yes.
think of your organisation as a sticker seaside rock, and the word we're going to have is send, going all, or send inclusion if you like, going all the way through. That means from the front of house staff that are at the beginning here, a cleaner, cafe, shop, all the rest of it, all the way through your curatorial team, your learning team, right up into like your director and your trustees and all the rest of it. They all need to be able to be on board and be on the sorry, I've just got my phones going. Be on board and be in there. But if there's any break in that at any point in the stick of rock of that word, then it's all going to fall down. So as a matter of wonderful stuff usually starts in the learning curatorial department, but no one has told the front of house staff, oh, we've got these backpacks. So then, and they're the ones that are handing them out. So I think
Yes.
probably first have that conversation, who has the live loved experience, think of the stick of rock and go, right, let's get the buy-in from the start, guys. And then go. So you've got to do a bit of internal work first, a bit of sort of like, looking inwards. And then think of the visitor journey, which actually starts way before they've turned up on your doorstep. It's on the website. For most
Right.
families coming
Yeah.
who have additional needs, or most visitors with additional needs or disabilities, access needs, they're going to look on the website first for practicality in terms of where do I park, or if I'm not driving, public transport near to you, that kind of thing. What facilities do you have? If you needed a changing place, Lou, and you haven't got one, you should say where there's a nearby one. And the
Okay.
wonderful thing is, big supermarkets are having a lot more put into the Asda's and Sainsbury's, and all sorts of supermarkets are having them in now. So you can go on the Changing Places website, and there's a map, and you can put your
Oh,
postcode in,
interesting.
find where the nearest ones are to you,
Okay.
and then signpost to those on your website if you don't have one, because it will just make a day's visit possible really. But think of things like the visual story. So a visual story, and there is we'll put links, but there's guidance on
Yeah.
how to make them on my website. It's a photo document with clear explanatory text. Clear, even that sentence wasn't, was it? With clear, plain English. Don't use the word explanatory. With clear, plain English. So here's a photograph of the museum. This is the front of the museum, or this is the museum entrance, and then here's the foyer or reception desk, a photograph of it. Maybe you're sat at the desk, we will meet you at the front desk, or this is where you buy tickets. Sometimes showing what the uniform is someone's wearing, or say you had a coloured lanyard, because if a family, let's go back to SEND, if a SEND family had an emergency and it might be a meltdown or a seizure or any other incident, they're going to very quickly need to know who is the person with what colour lanyard.
Yeah.
To grab the help with, and then it just maps through. So I've run training sessions, 2-hour training sessions on how to write these things. Again, it's not rocket science, and again there are loads of examples on the website to go and have a look. You do have to kind of pick a route, but it doesn't mean to say that the visitor has to go on that route. But it's basically photographs of, this is gallery 1, da-da, it looks like this, and gallery 1 has da-da-da in it, whatever, or there's seating. So think of the access. It's not an access statement, it's just a clear visual document, and as you're going through, you're not describing the stuff in the room. There may be a temporary exhibition space, you'll just have to say, this is a temporary exhibition gallery, it changes, stuff in this is different every time you come in. But what it does is it helps those that have either practical access needs in terms of like, well, where can I physically get around to do with my mobility or sensory. You could put sensory triggers on there as well if there's like a animatronic thing that's going to growl at you as you come in. Put that on there as for sure. And it also helps anyone, and lots of people can get anxiety anyway, regardless of whether or not have additional needs. Anxiety of coming into like a new place, having genuine threshold fear. So this document is brilliant. It's free to make. You can make them in a couple of days. You need your phone with a camera on it and a Word document. Just type it up and put it in Word. The reason why I say put it in Word and not a PDF or a PowerPoint or anything is Word is screen reader accessible, whereas PDF isn't.
Right. Yes.
So it is a bit of a faff getting the pictures and stuff up in Word, I'll agree. But and then you put that on your website, have it so that somebody can print it off, and it's their map. Because for a lot of us, I'm dyslexic, but I also have very late diagnosed ADHD. I can't read a schematic map for toffee. I mean, it's like, look at it and thinking, and my brain's going, but I have realised there are maps that look more like this is the building going up, that my brain goes, oh yeah, that's the building, it looks like that. But you get a building, you rip the walls off the building, and you're basically saying this is like the rat run of what it would look like if the walls weren't here. No. I can't do maps. So I was quite old until I realised I can't do maps. And I'm going to stop hitting myself on the head about that. And go, all right, if I can't do maps, I can't do maps. But what I could do was a visual story, because it's what it looks like.
I think it's such a great idea. And so from a lived experience, when I went for my autism diagnosis, my assessment, sorry, I remember going in there and saying to them, well done. The documents you sent me before I came had a clear kind of roadmap to how you get to the building itself, because I was driving there. And then it was like, can you wait in your car and you ring us to let us know it, then someone will come out and meet you. Perfect. And you'll be led into this, and this will be and I didn't realise how much I valued that until I had it. And I was like,
you have it, exactly.
Because I get really anxious going to new places, really anxious. And even down to like, what door do I go in? What if I can't find the door? What if I can't find the button to press? Is there an intercom? Am I knocking? And I overthink really, really to an extent.
But you layer on that. I mean, my daughter doesn't sleep very well, and that goes with the territory, doesn't it? Send us does. So you layer on that, you've had 2-3 hours sleep, good sleep, whatever, but you're definitely coming out because you've booked the activity that's running or whatever. You've maybe, I'm sure you've had a nappy disaster just before, or a toilet thing, or something's gone on. You've had to make sure you've packed everything. That could be meds, it could be food. We have to carry our food everywhere with us because of Lucy's diet. All sorts of things. You're not in a, let's skip to the museum kind of frame of mind when you pitch up. So anything that makes that, like you say, like your assessment day, anything that makes it probably does feel a bit like an assessment day. Because the other thing that people want to know is how sort of approachable are you when you come in there? What's our expectation of our behaviour going to need to be? So if you're having programming that's a bit further down the line, but programming that says, yes, we have a quiet session, or even, I wouldn't even call them quiet, say relaxed sessions, because they're anything but quiet. If you're saying that you can come in and be be yourself.
Yeah.
You should say you're allowed to be yourself, and that's that. So relax sessions, as soon as you can see that, as soon as you can see photographs, representation where you can recognize, oh, if I see a child in a wheelchair on a website, I know that they're going to be approachable to might be somebody like my daughter who's a child in a
Yeah.
wheelchair. Obviously, invisible disability is slightly more difficult to represent, but usually typically like the year defender type thing. So there's those things for the visitor journey. Sensory backpacks, I think they don't cost that much, less than £100 to make, 50 quid probably. Buy the stuff. I should say
Yeah, just
Amazon.
like having sensory
Amazon, but
toys.
other retail. Yeah, fidgety
Oh,
toys. Other available. Yeah, in a backpack, fidgety toys, a
right.
torch maybe, sunglasses if you've got particularly bright. Think of the sensory sort of triggers of stuff.
Right. Okay.
I mean, you can layer it up and say, I mean, I make symbol trails with widget and all sorts of things, but that's all singing or dancing. If we're starting for this, as a backpack to help. If you've got a mascot, the museum sometimes has a mascot, like a cuddly toy mascot, pop that in. If not, any other cuddly toy or glove puppet, they actually act as like a storytelling guide. They're a go-between. So they're really super helpful. There must be lots of research on this I'd love to do one day, but they are super helpful. So yeah, the backpacks really work, and having staff training, confident staff. And if you think, well, you want to start this next week and you haven't got time to get the training, have that conversation. Who have we got on our team already that knows what they're doing? Who's got
Yeah.
this lived loved experience? Are they happy to have a conversation to try and plan this out with you? And then getting the feedback. So the goodbye, I say, is massively important. And I mean, like I say, I do training that goes over hours in terms of like welcoming and stuff. But one thing about, as we're doing at the moment, we're looking at each other in the face. Sometimes people feel a bit challenged by being looked in the eyes, and look up, speak to the young person who's in a wheelchair, to them, not about them, over the head of
Yeah.
them, to the adult that's with them. And as best as possible, ask everybody if they've had a good day. And you don't have to be really good at Makaton to go, good day. Did you
Yeah.
have a good day? And if they're not, then ask why and get that explained why, and then note that down so you can start making some changes. Interesting as well for organisations that are looking for funding, the bigger funders like Lottery, Heritage Fund and Arts Council will want this information in your
Yeah.
application. So you
Okay.
need to get the evidence ahead of time. So doing that sort of like, you know, checking in with visitors as you go.
Mhm.
If you did want to develop something later on and you need to get funding, you've got to ask the questions.
Mhm. That's a great tip. That because organisations like that are desperate for funding, aren't they, to be
Yeah,
able to
yeah,
implement things.
yeah.
So that's great. Great little tidbit of knowledge there to build it and gather that information beforehand, because it sounds like it could be, I'm not going to say easy because none of this is easy, but I think it's just something little that you could kind of tick away with
Yeah,
and collect and collate
you'd be
beforehand.
surprised, but the visual stories and also particularly the sensory backpack. So I do a training session on that, and numerous times, lots of times, I'll get an email 2-3 weeks later where someone's been on the course going, thank you so much, I've done this, what do you reckon? Photograph it, bosh, done. I love the
Yep.
bish bash bosh, it's one of my favourite terms. Bish bash bosh, done, get it out.
Done. Yes.
Things come back, people don't like it, change it up. It's just a backpack with some
Yes.
stuff in it. It's not rocket science. So
Mhm.
it's but it makes a difference having ear defenders available, because people might forget them, or you may not have told them that actually there's some loud noises, or they've
Yeah.
got those hand dryers that push the skin off your hand. You need to have stuff that enables people to feel comfortable and not have to walk away, because they won't come back. If they
Yes.
had a bad experience, and not only will they not come back, this is ending on a little bit of a threat, they'll probably tell 10, 20
Say
people
they'll
on
tell
Facebook,
people.
don't go there. So yeah, so you get it right and just start somewhere, I think. And like I say, that sendingmuseums.org has got, I would like to say, pretty much everything on it to at least get you started. So do have a look, sit down with a cup of coffee and
Brilliant.
talk
And
through
what
it.
I'll do, thank you. What I'll do is I'll put some links and everything under the episode so that people can be
Great, thank you.
directed
Yeah,
to find all these
lovely.
things,
Thanks,
because
Lucy.
I feel like I could talk to you for hours on this. There's
Oh, I
such
can talk
depth,
for
isn't there?
days. I can talk
There's
on
such
this.
depth to it. So many things that we can talk
Yeah.
about, so many things that we can dig deeper into,
Mm.
so many tips, advice. It's amazing. So yeah, I'll pop a few links underneath so people can do
Great.
that. Is there are you happy for people to reach out to you and contact you to
Yeah, on
discuss ways
my
to
I'm gonna have to read it out because of the dyslexia thing. So it's my work email address, www.sambowen.co.uk. I'll give you that link as well. And yeah, I mean, I don't work in the holidays, so I'm looking forward to having Easter holiday off soon. It's been great to talk to you and have a nice,
Amazing.
lovely sunny day. And I just, yeah,
Yeah.
to families, just, obviously families can take their own stuff, but do start using museums because they're wonderful places to go to. And it's absolutely okay to just go to the cafe, go to the shop and leave. I say that pretty much every one of
Oh,
my training
really?
sessions. Oh yes, don't feel like you have to go and learn anything. No, you don't have to be good at history or science or whatever. I'm really going to be people with going twitching now, listeners. But no, we've got to start using museums, and if that's what feels comfortable to you, they're
Yeah.
your resource. Go in and say, I mean, if they're free to use, that's easier. Not all of them are free to go in, but go in and use it in the way that feels comfortable for you, and then nudge in. So it might be you do one gallery next time, or you go and do the temporary exhibition. And when it feels like a safe place for you, you will use it like it's home. And I think that, or home outside of the home, that's what my core hope is for parents, is that they start actually using these places as they were intended way, way ago, hundreds of years ago, to be places of enlightenment and enrichment, cultural enrichment. That's what they were intended for. So we've got to get back to that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like you've answered my last question,
Oh,
but I'll ask it just in case there's anything else you want to add. But because Recap's all about embracing everyone, making everyone feel at home and part of this kind of supportive community, I do ask all guests to think of a piece of advice or an empowering message
mm.
to just share that love and support. And obviously you've mentioned a few things there, but is there anything else that you would like to say, even just to one person, to have that effect?
Oh, celebrate yourself, be who you are. Lucy's I've got some amazing friends. I have to mention my friend Kelly Croft at Born Anxious. She has this amazing t-shirt range. Well, it's clothing range, but with positive messages on. And last year, 2 years ago, Lucy has her own range of clothing through them, which is great. We created with Lucy and picked the colours.
Oh,
And
wow.
one of them is I'll send you a picture of the t-shirt. Is happy being me, and I just wish everybody could just be happy being themselves. Um, and just go out there. It is a bit of a trust on both sides, isn't it? It's trusting as a family that you're going to go somewhere and you can be you, and it's trusting as a museum, maybe organizer or director might be watching this, going, I trust that my museum can be good enough, and that we can welcome different groups of people. There has to be an element of trust, but yeah, happy being you, and maybe that's my final message.
It's been amazing speaking to you
Oh,
today.
bless
Thank
you,
you
and
so
you.
much for taking the
You.
time and sharing. And I wish you
Welcome.
all the very best of luck with your campaign
Thank
and
you.
your fight for justice going forward. I look
Yeah,
forward to
yay.
it. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.